as expected. Now, Republican National Committee Chair Ron McDaniel says possibly former House Speaker Newt Gingrich as well could speak tonight. We'll keep an eye on that for you. One of the races we have been watching closely for you tonight is the Senate race in Ohio. Our Dee Dee Gadden joins us now with what voters there are saying. Dee Dee.
Eugene, Republican J.D. Vance facing off against Democratic Representative Tim Ryan. Throughout the campaign, Ryan has pushed for more jobs and better paying opportunities for the working class. Vance sharing plans to tackle crime and support law enforcement. But what do voters want? Today at the polls, they shared with us their top concerns.
I say women's rights, pretty much. Women's rights.
The number one concern was the threat to democracy that I perceive by certain individuals that are running for office.
I guess I consider the economy, but I'm also a recent graduate, so I feel like I haven't known anything other than inflation.
Economy has been a focus for the two candidates. It comes at a critical time, Eugene, as Democrats battle to maintain control of the Senate.
Dee Dee, thank you. The divide between political parties. Coming up, how moderate voters are responding to candidate pushes this midterm election.
And tonight, the Live Desk is tracking extreme winter weather along the West Coast. The steps California is now taking to make sure people can get to their ballot boxes next. Severe weather threatening both coasts tonight. The East Coast bracing for a late season hurricane, and over on the West Coast, they are now under a winter weather threat. Winter storm watches and warnings covering about a dozen states tonight. As much as 4 feet of snow is possible in parts of Nevada. And take a look at this brand new video just into the Live Desk tonight from some of the hardest hit areas. Take a look at how quickly that snow is coming down in Fairfield, Montana. That system is also bringing bitter cold temperatures. The current temp there, just 2 degrees. And this video right here captured on the California side of Lake Tahoe. First responders there had to use heavy-duty equipment to move snow off the road at this sheriff's office. Crews in California have been operating in storm operation mode all day today for several hours, all in an effort to keep roads clear enough for people to get to their voting precincts. The National Weather Service now saying this storm is much stronger than what the region usually sees in early November.
A student is dead tonight after a shooting at a Seattle high school. Investigators said the shooting happened this morning at a hallway in Ingram High School in North Seattle. The district superintendent says the student that was killed is believed to have been targeted. Police say a person was taken into custody at a bus stop with a gun, but officers haven't said if that person was also a student at that school.
The push for pot. We are tracking the Election Day efforts to legalize recreational marijuana. The state's now eyeing expanding its use. Next, right here at the Live Desk. The push for pot on the ballot tonight in 5 of these states, Maryland, Missouri, Arkansas, both North and South Dakota, all deciding whether or not to legalize recreational marijuana. And so far tonight, voters approving those measures in all 5 of these states right here. Now, all 5 of those states went to former President Donald Trump in 2020, except for the state of Maryland. Now, these 5 also currently have legal medical marijuana programs in place, including Arkansas, which in 2016 became the first Bible Belt state to approve marijuana for medical use. If approved in Arkansas, the state hopes to cash in on this growing industry, enforcing a 10% sales tax on recreation cannabis sales. Now, that money, we've learned, would be used for a yearly stipend for law enforcement officers and drug court programs. Now, recreational marijuana now legal in 19 states, including Washington, D.C., but remains illegal on the federal level. We're watching the results on this tonight, and we'll monitor the latest right here from the live desk.
Well, tens of millions of people voted before Election Day. Let's check in now with our fact-check team, breaking down those early vote numbers. Courtney and Janae joining us now. What do we know about those voters?
Eugene, we found roughly 46 million people voted early by mail and in person. That's according to the U.S. Elections Project, and that's data from 45 states. The majority were women. They casted 54% of ballots.
And of those early voters, over 10 million were Democrat and just over 8 million were Republican. Now, those numbers are based on about half of U.S. states that report party registration data. We also found that people 41 and older make up 83% of that early voter total, and that's based on 6 states that report age data. And we will have another update for you in the next half hour. Eugene?
The live desk tonight on Election Watch, where polls close in just the next 5 minutes, and the latest numbers on some of the nation's biggest races. We're back in a bit.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Breaking news as we come on the air. Election results pouring in. Good evening. I'm Eugene Ramirez. In Florida, Ron DeSantis will remain as governor. And history in Maryland tonight. Wes Moore elected as the first black governor of the state. Lots more happening all across the country as polls continue to close in the next hour. The National Desk brings you election night team coverage. At the live desk, Ryan Smith tracking critical battles for governors' mansions all across the country. Our Dee Gatton hearing what's on the mind of voters tonight. The fact check team digs into exit polls and some other key data. And chief political correspondent Scott Thuman at the big board tonight dissecting the early numbers coming in. Tonight, a political showdown is taking place in some western battleground states where a 2020 election denier is making a bid for governor out in Arizona, and the balance of power is at stake in a Senate race in Nevada. We go live now to Scott Thuman at our Capitol Hill bureau. Scott, what are you seeing so far tonight out of Arizona and Nevada? Lots of people watching those states.
Oh, and very closely, Eugene. Real battlegrounds there. First, we've shown you the East Coast, a little bit of the middle of America. Now we look out west. Now, Colorado is a state that at the moment looks like Senator Michael Bennet, the Democrat, will be able to retain his seat, and that perhaps Mike Lee out in Utah, Senator Republican, keeps that. So what about these two, Nevada and Arizona? Could be potential nail biters. And if we look first at Nevada, you've got the first Latina senator, Catherine Cortez Masto. Why is she in this really tough race against the challenger, Adam Laxalt, the Republican, former attorney general? He's got a family that's storied in the politics and the history of Nevada. It is right now a lead that he holds on an average of polls by 0.2%. We don't have numbers yet coming in from Nevada because the polls are still open there. However, at this moment, you have to say, okay, why do we have such a tight race? When it's a Democrat, it's a state that's starting to become more Democratic. Well, part of it, you've got $5 gasoline almost on average out in Nevada right now. You've got a really tough economic situation and, of course, a lot going on at the border. So what's happened is Adam Laxalt has said, hey, look, she's responsible for the chaos out there. She's been nothing but a rubber stamp for Joe Biden. What does she say? Well, she says, here's someone who is very Trumpian, has been, was part of the campaign chair in Nevada for him, and an election denier on top of it. President Obama has gone out there to try and get her across the finish line. That could be one we watch well into the night, maybe even beyond that. And then how about Arizona? This is another really tight one because you've got Mark Kelly. He's the incumbent, the Democrat, the former astronaut, married to Gabrielle Giffords, former congresswoman here on Capitol Hill. And he won that in a special runoff, special election. So he's looking for his first full 6-year term. He's going up against Blake Masters, a Republican who, despite the fact that Mark Kelly has been seen as perhaps a better fundraiser, Republicans started throwing a lot more resources into this race when they realized that Blake Masters actually had a shot at unseating Mark Kelly. He also has been accused of being an election denier, being very Trumpian. Nonetheless, could he get some benefit out of that? In other words, as you mentioned, Eugene, Kari Lake is running for governor in Arizona and doing quite well in a lot of the polls. Could she help him because he's on the same ticket? That's one of the factors out there. You've also got the Libertarian candidate who dropped out not long ago. That could help Masters, even though the other candidate was only getting 1%. That may be all it takes. By the way, President Biden, his approval rating here in the state of Arizona, only 38%. And that's something Mark Kelly has done to try and distance himself from Democrats, saying, I'm willing to go up against them, especially on issues like immigration, for example.
Are you surprised, Scott, before we move on from Arizona, are you surprised with Blake Masters and Kari Lake, we'll see how she does later, but all the support that those candidates are getting, people who have come out as election deniers, people who, in Kari Lake's case, has called herself Trump in a dress, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she has, and she speaks a lot like him these days, and some people have even gone so far as to project way into the distance, maybe she becomes someone who is a running mate should former President Trump end up on the ticket again. It is a bit surprising, but it is not unusual. This isn't an anomaly, Eugene. As you know, when you look at the candidates, a slew of candidates across the country right now, especially on the GOP side, there's somewhere between 290, maybe 300 who are considered election deniers. There's someone who at least is challenging what happened in 2020, still has that sentiment, or is saying they won't accept the results necessarily of this current race if they lose. It's become so popular that some people believe between 60 and 70% of the candidates out there on ballots across the country fall under that category. So she's just one of many. Now, she's got a charisma to her as a former news anchor. She knows how to handle herself in front of the camera, and that's come in quite handy in her race against Katie Hobbs there, the former secretary or current secretary of state there. But you are starting to see this pattern, Eugene, and I think that's important. And the other thing to mention here, if we just mention one more number for you, 42. 42 is the current approval rating for President Biden. Obviously, he's underwater. He doesn't want those numbers. No president does. He's on the rise again. They've been worse. But how much of a drag is that in races like in Nevada, in Arizona, in Georgia? How much does that hurt him? Because that's a state that he flipped, Georgia, to make blue. In Pennsylvania, where he won, and where he, of course, reversed course because that's a state that President Trump had won in 2016. So the presidential approval rating does matter beyond just what's going on at the White House.
Now, Scott, I don't want to put you on the spot now, but when we come back, I want to pick your brain on independent voters and the role they're having, particularly when it comes to these Senate races that are so tight. They could really make it or break it for some of these candidates.
Oh, yeah, they've got a very big say. We'll look into it for you.
Hold that thought. We'll talk about that in just a bit. Thanks so much, Scott. Governors carrying some extra weight these days as well, with the Supreme Court sending power back to the states, talking about things like the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. Let's check in with the live desk now. Ryan Smith continues her team coverage. Again, Arizona, a big state that everybody's looking at tonight, Ryan.
And Eugene, there are a lot of breaking updates just into the live desk over the last 30 minutes or so. An Arizona judge now denying that emergency request to extend voting hours in Maricopa County. That's the state's most populated county. It includes the city of Phoenix. It was filed by a number of Republican organizations saying voters needed more time to cast their ballots after issues with voting machines. The judge saying there wasn't enough time to implement that request. The county now saying it expects to have 99% of all votes counted by Friday, and Arizona is home to one of the most closely watched governor's races across the country. Polling has shown Trump-endorsed Republican Kari Lake and Democrat Katie Hobbs neck and neck in these final weeks. We'll, of course, be right here to keep you updated as we get those first results in tonight. And in Georgia, incumbent Governor Brian Kemp has retaken the lead tonight. He's now leading 53-45. With about 66% of the vote in so far. Stacey Abrams had originally taken that early lead, but we've watched it shrink over the past 3 hours. And Ron DeSantis, as we mentioned earlier in our broadcast, has now secured re-election in Florida after holding a sizable lead over his Democrat challenger Charlie Crist all night tonight. And with 89% of the vote in tonight, he has a dominant lead at 19 points. And across the country, there are 36 governor's races happening tonight. We are keeping tabs on each of those. Democrats already flipping 2 seats, one in Maryland and one in Massachusetts. We'll be tracking them for you throughout the night right here at the live desk.
All right, we'll check back in just a bit. Ryan, deeply discouraged is how voters describe the state of America right now and its future as well. That's according to an extensive survey conducted for the Associated Press. Half of the voters who participated in that survey said inflation factored significantly in their vote, with price increases hitting groceries, gasoline, housing, and food over the past year. The U.S. economy was an overarching concern for voters, about 8 in 10 of them saying that it was in bad shape as high inflation has fueled fears of a recession. Not all voters, however, blaming President Biden's policies for those higher prices. In Georgia tonight, some key races for Senate and governor. Georgia's Secretary of State saying that the state's voters came out in near presidential level numbers. Didi Gatton joins us now with what's on voters' minds there. Didi.
Eugene, many of us hear the word economy come up in daily conversations, but in Georgia, home to a few critical races, that didn't come up once for this voter.
I saw what the Supreme Court did to women's rights in the last term, and it made me really concerned as a gay man that they're not going to be standing up for my rights in the next term if that comes up for debate. So I want to make sure that the people who are in office, both at the state level and at the federal level, have my rights in mind.
Georgia's Senate race is one of the most closely watched races nationwide. There is a third-party candidate. CBS News reporting if no candidate wins at least 50% of the vote, the race could go to a runoff in December. Eugene.
TD, thanks. Tonight we're also following some developments in an issue that appears to be bubbling up in Arizona. Election officials trying to calm concerns now after machines rejected ballots in the first few hours of voting. Some now questioning election integrity there. Ryan Smith mentioned just a few moments ago, several groups now, including the Republican National Committee, have filed a lawsuit over this. County officials, they say it's just a technical issue, claiming that the tabulating machines at about 40 locations rejected those ballots because a built-in security feature was accidentally activated. But some Republicans, including high-profile gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake, continue raising doubt.
They gotta fix this problem. This is incompetency. I hope it's not malice, but we're gonna fix it. We're gonna win. And when we win, there's gonna be come to Jesus for elections in Arizona.
And Donald Trump Jr. chiming in. He's among those who are tweeting tonight about concerns in Arizona, in some cases already suggesting that the election might be, quote, stolen. Another lawsuit being filed in Pennsylvania, this one by Democrats. They want ballots that have been deemed invalid because of incorrectly written or missing dates to be counted in the election. Pennsylvania's Supreme Court already ruled in favor of the Republican National Committee last week to have those ballots tossed out, citing state law requiring the date on the return envelope. Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman's campaign is one of the parties involved in that suit. His campaign issuing a statement arguing that the, quote, date instruction imposes unnecessary hurdles. And Florida today pushing back against the federal government. State election officials objecting to the Justice Department's plan to monitor polling places in the state, arguing that it violates Florida election law. Officials sent a letter to the DOJ warning that their election monitors would not be allowed inside, and even if they found themselves inside, it would be, quote, counterproductive and could potentially undermine confidence in the election. The Justice Department did send poll watchers to 23 other states tasked with ensuring federal voting rights laws were being followed. Today's power, jockeying, and legal wrangling that continues tonight follow a slew of midterm-related lawsuits previously filed. The National Desk, Kayla Gaskins, takes us beyond the podium, giving us an in-depth look at the legal challenges stacking up this election.
The Department of Justice expanding their visibility this election day, while the DOJ routinely monitors some precincts to ensure safe and fair voting access. Tuesday's deployment to 64 jurisdictions marks the largest presence in years. The move comes as lawsuits over voting practices pile up in competitive states.
Over the past 2 decades, spending on legal expenses has increased from $5 million to $66 million in elections.
As of late last week, campaigns and outside groups submitted 120 lawsuits across the country, nearly double the amount of cases filed before the 2020 election.
You're seeing 2 kinds of lawsuits filed. Most of the lawsuits that are being filed by Democrats are to change the existing rules. Most of the lawsuits filed by Republican candidates and parties are to ensure that, in fact, the laws and rules as they exist are followed.
In Pennsylvania, for example, Republicans want strict enforcement of the dates on mail-in ballots. Democrats calling such enforcement a violation of the Civil Rights Act. In Georgia, Democrats are asking the court to extend the voting deadline because 1,000 absentee ballots were not sent out in a timely manner.
You've got to recognize the politics with mail-in ballots. They're overwhelmingly Democratic. Really, both sides want an electorate that favors them, and Democrats are going to push hard for the inclusion of vote by mail ballots, and Republicans are going to push against that.
Some predict these legal cases are but a dress rehearsal of the battles to come in 2024. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
You are watching the National Desk election night team coverage. And coming up in just moments, the election results coming in right now. We go live to New York and Florida for a look at what's happening on the ground there as voters pick their governor. And I'll check in with the fact check team breaking down some exit polls for us. It is election night and we are just getting started.
And breaking tonight, former President Trump speaking at his Florida home Mar-a-Lago. Let's listen in right now.
And just a fantastic woman with a husband who's great. He's maybe the largest human being I've ever seen. He was a offensive lineman in the NFL for a long time and a great football player, actually. Played for Alabama. But Katie, congratulations to you. And we have a lot of other good ones going out there. Herschel's leading right now. So we have a lot of big races going on right now. So enjoy that, enjoy the food, and enjoy everything. And really, in all fairness, it is a great honor to have the media with us, and we hope you enjoy yourself and this wonderful group of people. These are the people that you read about. They are not the nicest people in the world, but they are brilliant financially. We're not going to see any great football stars in here, but we do see brilliant people. But but they're great people and very, very successful people.
And you've just been listening for a few moments there. Former President Donald Trump speaking at his Mar-a-Lago home at his own election watch party, mentioning some of the candidates he's been following and supporting across the country tonight. He just wrapped up. Stay with us. We'll be back after these messages. And breaking tonight, one of the earliest gubernatorial race winners tonight, Wes Moore in Maryland. We are told he is speaking tonight at his own campaign rally. We're going to go ahead and take that live for you right here. If we have that, let's listen in.
Ella nació en Cuba. She was born in Cuba. She immigrated to this country from Jamaica. And she taught public schools for nearly 40 years. She came here to build a life, but she ended up building a legacy. She also helped take care of me and my family after my father died, because he didn't get the health care that he needed. My father could have been saved, but he was left behind. So you see, this is personal to me. I have seen how a society with broken policies can leave its people broken too. Leave no one behind is not just a slogan. It is a value statement. And it is a value that will guide me as your next governor. Our administration will fight every single day for every single Marylander and make sure they have a chance to succeed, and this is our time to do it and to make it happen. But before I do close, I do want to take a moment just to speak about this state is blessed because we've had a lot of firsts tonight. Aruna Miller, the first immigrant and the first woman of color in the state's history to serve as lieutenant governor. Brooke Learman, our first female comptroller. Our first black attorney general.
You were listening there to Wes Moore speaking. Wes Moore, now the first black governor of the state of Maryland. Before we go to a quick break, we're going to show you a live picture here. The headquarters of Dr. Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. Right now, 46% of precincts reporting the Democrat, John Fetterman, in the lead right now. We'll be right back.
Abortion access now on the ballot in a handful of states in California, Michigan, and Vermont. And at this hour tonight, voters overwhelmingly approving measures to codify abortion rights in those 3 states. And take a look at this in Kentucky. It appears voters are following the same route Kansas took just a months ago, shooting down what's known as Amendment 2. That amendment would state there is no right to an abortion in the state constitution or any requirement to fund an abortion. And so far tonight, Kentuckians voting no on this amendment, 54% to 45%, but that's with about 70% of the votes in. Montana voters are deciding if health care providers could face criminal charges in some circumstances. That law would declare that an embryo or fetus is a legal person. We are tracking the results here at the live desk for you all night long.
Ryan, thank you. And we now go back to our fact-check team. They've been looking at national and state exit polls. Courtney and Connor joining us now. How do Democrats and Republicans differ when it comes to their top concerns?
Hey, Eugene, we found that there's a pretty big split between the two political parties. Now, Courtney and I dug into some national exit polls from CNN, and we found that nearly half of Republican voters cite inflation as their top issue when they headed to the polls. But 44% of Democrats, they called abortion their top priority.
And the polls also found that voters were mostly opposed to the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. About 21% said they felt dissatisfied, while around 40% said they were angry. And about 60% of all voters said that abortion should be illegal in most or all cases. Now, that is up from 51% during the 2020 election. We're digging deeper into these exit polls, and we'll be back with an update in 30 minutes. Eugene?
Our fact-check team joining us tonight. Thanks so much for your help, ladies. We're going to go out now live to Tampa, Florida. Reporter Mike Magnoli there covering the DeSantis campaign. We heard from Governor DeSantis just a bit ago when he claimed victory, calling this win over Democrat Charlie Crist a win for the ages. Mike, what's the mood there like tonight, and what are you hearing there in Florida?
Hey, Eugene. Well, let me take you back a couple of hours. When we arrived here in Tampa, the convention center was all decked out in signs that look like the signs that you see on the interstate. Welcome to the free state of Florida, they said. And that was really the theme of the victory speech that we heard from Governor DeSantis a short time ago. He talked about how he enabled businesses to stay open throughout the pandemic. He talked about giving parents more of a choice and more voices when it comes to their kids' education. So we expected those themes in his victory speech. We heard that in his victory speech. A lot of people, though, listening for what his next step might be, right? There's a lot of speculation that he might be running for president. He did make references to the fact that he has more fight, that there is a long road ahead. And I have to say, he did sound like a presidential candidate on that stage up there tonight. But he does have a storm to worry about, right, Eugene? There is a hurricane coming towards the east coast of Florida. I was talking to his campaign staffers. I know that he couldn't spend very much time here tonight, has to head over to the other side of the state and deal with that storm that's on the approach. Send it back to you.
All right, a big and busy night for Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Mike Magnoli reporting for us from Tampa tonight. Thank you. The deck of history stacked against Democrats tonight. Still ahead, we're taking a closer look at the party's strategy these midterms and the role President Biden played in that.
And check those lotto tickets. Someone right now sitting on a record-breaking Powerball jackpot tonight. We take you to where that winning ticket was sold in California and hear from the gas station owner who sold it next here at the Live Desk. Well, someone struck Lotto Gold in the Golden State. That record-setting $2 billion jackpot, the largest in Lotto history, finally announced after a 10-hour delay overnight due to technical issues. Here's a look at where the winning ticket was sold. That's Joe's Service Center in Los Angeles County. The winner has yet to come forward, but California law does require his or her name to be made public. And the odds of matching all 6 numbers on that lone ticket, 1 in 292 million. It's a thrilling news for the gas station owner in California, who now nets a cool $1 million for selling that winning ticket.
I come to this country, the country for a dream for the people looking for a better life.
Where'd you come from?
I come 1980 with $14,000 and 2 kids and with a wife. As a family business, all my kids, they help me. Very soon, maybe I will be retired.
So when we find out who this mystery winner is, here is what that winner walks away with potentially. Out of the $2 billion prize, the cash value, $997 million.
Republican Senator Marco Rubio winning re-election in Florida tonight. Moments ago, he just addressed supporters there in Florida. Take a listen to some of what he said.
And they have joined this incredible new movement that isn't just going to change the country, it's going to change the Republican Party. After tonight, the Republican Party will never be the same, and that's a great thing for America and a great thing for Republicans.
Marco Rubio beating out Democrat Val Demings. Still ahead, battle for control. Scott Thurman looking at results in 3 Midwest states, any of which could swing the balance of power in the Senate. Before we go to a break, give you a live look here at the celebration for Governor Ron DeSantis underway right now in Tampa, Florida. Earlier tonight, he called his victory over Democrat Charlie Crist a, quote, win for the ages. The governor now facing a big storm headed to Florida. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Live from the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. Good evening, I'm Eugene Ramirez. As polls close coast to coast, the control of Congress is at stake tonight. Scott Thuman joining us again live from our Capitol Hill Bureau. Scott, of course, we're still waiting for some key races to be called, but how have you seen the balance of power shifted already so far?
Yeah, a lot of movement out there, Eugene, so far tonight. Take a look. This is where we began the night on the House side. As you know, Democrats hold the majority in the House, but it's a small one, 220 to 212. So Republicans just need to gain 5 seats if they are to alter who has the gavel. And take a look at where we stand right now. Starting to fill in a little bit, right? Republicans 94, Democrats 55. A lot of the projections show that Republicans could end up the night with maybe 15, maybe 20, 25 seat advantage in the House. Don't know. A lot of white still to fill in there. Let's look at what's going on over in the Senate. Of course, we began the night 50-50. You know that. We talked so much about how the vice president serves as the tiebreaker. That's the only advantage Democrats have in the Senate right now. Republicans need to gain 1 seat net. That would give them the gavel. Where do we stand right now? Democrats 42, Republicans 41. Some simple math will show us that means there's 17 seats that are still up for grabs here, and that means Republicans need to add 10. They do so. They've got 51. They have control. Also, as we talk about what's going on nationally, Eugene, earlier tonight you asked about independence. Yes, the country seems very, very split down the middle. That is not a surprise. But exit polling right now indicates 31% of respondents have said they identify as independent. Where are they sending their support? Where do their votes go? 49% to the Democratic candidates, 48 to Republican. So it doesn't get any tighter. What are Republican and Democrat voters doing? Same exit polling showing they're supporting their own party, 96%, voting for the opposite party, 3%. This is going to be a nail biter. We know that. It is not a surprise. What it is a call for patience, because across the country you have all these seats that we're still waiting for results in. The check mark is only where it's been determined in the Senate. Everything else still awaiting. Some of these are going to be very late. Georgia could be really tough. Arizona said they hope to have all 99% of their votes counted by Friday. We're talking about 3 days from now. So what's going to happen in Pennsylvania? Will there be challenges? There are legal challenges across the board. We're going to talk about that next time we talk, Eugene, about the legal challenges out there.
Yeah, you know, fascinating that we're seeing how divided even the independent voters are. Talk about, polarization in America. It's not just Republican versus Democrats. Even the independents are split almost 50-50, 48 to 49%. Really fascinating to see that. Scott, you're looking at all these states that we may not have definitive races announced tonight. Are we looking at weeks from now? Are we looking by the end of the week? Really control of the Senate and the House? We might not know this for a while.
We might not know. And remember, we talked about it earlier tonight, Eugene, but history is pretty recent on Georgia being the example. And again, you had 2 Republican senators. You had Kelly Loeffler, David Perdue. Both of them lose to first-timers in Georgia, both Democrats. So the state swung from Republican to Democrat. But remember how long we had to wait for it. It was a runoff, and that was determined January 6th, same day as the attack on the Capitol. So it almost got overshadowed, even though Democrats took control of the chamber at that point, which was highly significant for President Biden coming in and having both the House and Senate. Really gave him the ability to do things like pass the Infrastructure Reduction Act, pass the infrastructure bill. Had he not had a Senate, probably doesn't get those. So a lot of people don't really look back and realize how significant that election, those runoffs were in Georgia, but it took until January 6th before we knew the answer. Could be the same case here, and that's what we're going to have to watch. Also, Alaska, for example, Eugene, we know that it's going to be Republican based on all the polling, but who will it be? They have a very difficult system out there. They do ranked choice voting, so top 4 candidates all get to keep running. It means you have 2 Republicans facing off in the Senate seat, plus a Democrat. It's still going to take a time to get these results.
Yeah, it's going to be not just tonight. It's going to be a little bit of time before we know exactly what's going to be playing out. But we'll stay on top of it. Scott Thuman, we'll check back with you in just a bit. Thank you.
And here at the Live Desk tonight, we start with a live look at votes being counted in the state of Michigan. Governor Gretchen Whitmer now facing Trump-endorsed Tudor Dixon for the job as top executive there. Now, this is a historic run for Dixon. She's the first woman to secure the GOP nomination for governor in that state. She's currently trailing Whitmer by 4 points tonight. Voters electing governors across 36 states tonight. A lot of action unfolding in those state capitals. And Democrats already flipping 2 states, impacting several hot-button issues like abortion and gun rights. One of those is Maryland, where Democrat Wes Moore easily secured the job, becoming the first black governor of that state. And new results just coming in from Pennsylvania as well. Democrat Attorney General Josh Shapiro is off to an early lead over Trump-endorsed Republican Doug Mastriano. With 19% of the vote in, Shapiro is leading, 56% to 42%. Mastriano had trailed in recent polling there. And we're also keeping a close eye in New York. Polls closing there earlier tonight. Recent polling showed Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin closing in on Governor Kathy Hochul, but the Democrat retaking the lead tonight. She's now up 62% to 37%. And in one of the tightest gubernatorial races in the country, that's in Nevada tonight, Governor Steve Sisolak facing off against Republican and Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Still no results to report just yet tonight in that race. And it's important to note here, President Biden narrowly winning Nevada in 2020.
That's right, Ryan. Thank you. And now as we wait for election results tonight to find out what's next, we're already getting a breakdown of how politicians did on the campaign trail, the messages and strategies that worked and resonated with voters and those that did not. The National Desk, Christine Frizzell, has that part of the story.
Hello, Maryland.
President Biden on a blue state blitz.
Hello, New York.
Spending the final weeks leading up to Election Day campaigning largely with Democrats expected to win by large margins.
President Biden is going where President Biden could be helpful to turn out Democratic votes in places that tend to like President Biden.
Those rare stops in swing states, mostly with his former boss, President Obama. And that's for a good reason, says Professor Peter Loge.
Elect John Fetterman to the Senate, please.
President Biden's approval rating coming in at 39%, according to this week's Reuters Ipsos poll. Political analysts say top issues Democrats have been running on, like abortion rights and threats to democracy, are a little more abstract than Republicans' top priorities, the economy and crime, which most people feel every day. And there's simply history to contend with.
The president's party loses seats in the House in midterm elections. That's almost as close to a truism as you're going to get in American politics.
Both President Obama in 2010 and President Trump in 2018 made far more midterm campaign stops. And while some crucial seats flipped from Democrat to Republicans in the Senate, like in Missouri and Indiana in 2018, and Republicans held control of the Senate, Democrats made enormous gains and took control of the House that year. Most polls showing a similar flip this time around.
It's about deploying the right messenger with the right message to the right audience in the right medium at the right time. And Trump is good at getting angry people angry to marching them to the polls. President Biden, that's not really his forte.
I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk.
We'll take a look here. Former President Donald Trump casting his ballot in person at the Recreation Center in Palm Beach, Florida. He told reporters there that he voted to re-elect GOP Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, the two Republicans could be 2024 presidential rivals. Trump encouraged Americans to head to the polls, saying if they want to, quote, stop the destruction of our country, they should vote Republican.
There's only one choice to end this madness. If you support the decline and fall of America, then you must, absolutely must, vote for the radical left crazy people, the radical left Democrats.
Trump also gave another hint of a 2024 White House bid at a rally last night in Ohio. He said he's making a big announcement next week. Kevin McCarthy extremely confident tonight that Republicans will take back the House. The House Minority Leader has worked on a victory speech for the last few weeks, according to CNN. McCarthy's team's goal is to pick up at least 20 seats. His team says he could speak around 11 Eastern if the night goes as expected. Republican National Committee Chair Ron McDaniel and possibly former House Speaker Newt Gingrich may be speaking tonight as well. We'll keep you posted on those. Now, in Florida's race for governor, voters had to choose between GOP Governor Ron DeSantis and Democratic challenger Charlie Crist, a former governor of the state. It's one of the key races we've been following for you tonight. Dee Dee Gadden joining us now live with what drove voters to the polls in Florida. Didi.
Eugene, in the days leading up to the election, I heard from experts voicing concerns about whether or not people would even come out to vote. In Florida today, you got a sense of the urgency to not only be there, but to show your kids why this election matters.
I think that it's really important that we teach our kids to vote because we need to, the only way that we're going to get for what we want in this country if we come out here and vote for the things that we believe in.
This is the most important election of our lives.
Why is that?
It's going to change the country. Afghanistan, everything is a big issue.
Hearing from voters, inflation came up repeatedly as a top concern, and coast to coast a feeling of helplessness, but voting as a way to change the narrative. We'll hear more from voters coming up. Eugene.
Didi, thanks. We'll check back with you. In Nevada tonight, Democrat Senator Catherine Cortez Masto facing Republican Adam Laxalt. For weeks, polling has shown the duo are essentially neck and neck. The National Desk, Brett Forrest, joins us now from Las Vegas. How are things shaping up there? What's it looking like on the ground?
Well, the polls closed just about 40 minutes ago, but to our understanding, lines are still excessively long here in Clark County, especially where Las Vegas is located. And these lines could be hours long at this point. And in Nevada, we do not release any election results until everyone in the state has voted. And with how things are looking right now, it might be hours still until anything starts trickling in from our Secretary of State once they get the word that everyone has voted. So the race, the Senate race, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, she's long been considered the most vulnerable Democrat in the Senate, and Republican challenger Adam Laxalt is hoping to unseat her, flip the balance of power in the Senate. Nevada's race could very well decide who continues to control the Senate. So Cortez Masto, if you aren't aware of her background, she is a former Nevada Attorney General, just like Adam Laxalt. She's the first Latina elected to Senate, and she won by about 2.5 points in 2016. But since then, we had COVID shutdowns, which impacted Nevada greatly, and the Republicans have hit her continually on economy, inflation, high gas prices. They've really tied their campaign into how she votes in line with President Biden. Now, I just spoke to a Laxalt campaign team member, and they said after what they see at the polls today, what they see in early voting, mail-in ballots, they are feeling very confident tonight. But again, with just how long lines still are, it could be days until we hear anything in these major races being declared, not just Senate in Nevada, but also the governor's race and other down ballot races. Now, I did also just hear word that Washoe County, where Reno is located, and then Clark County here, where Las Vegas is located, they don't have enough personnel in their polling sites to count all of the mail-in ballots that have come in today, and it might take days until they can even touch what's come in today. So that, again, is going to add to just how long these results could be drawn out. So Laxalt's campaign, they're feeling confident right now, but we may not have anything to declare until up to Saturday by some estimates. So
maybe a
we'll
long
keep an eye
night
on things here, but I'll send it back to you guys.
A long night and perhaps a long week for you guys there in Nevada. But I do want to ask you, you have a Latina candidate. You have a large Latino or Hispanic community there in Nevada. What's the turnout been like for the Latino community there?
So the turnout so far, to my understanding, has been strong. Both campaigns have been really pushing to get the Latino electorate to them because they make up about 20% of all voters in Nevada. Nevada is considered the third most diverse state in the country. But as far as things are looking right now, a lot of Latinos have jumped over to the Republican side to vote for them, and that could be the deciding factor. But in Nevada, there's so many large pockets of the electorate, of electoral blocks, that any one of those groups, with how close this race is expected to be, could be the deciding factor. But of course, the Latino vote has been one of the big talking points this campaign season.
And Las Vegas, of course, a very different place from rural Nevada, very different types of voters. There's been, in fact, a very strong divide between those voters. Which party do you think is benefiting here from the Vegas voters versus those in, let's say, southern or northern Nevada outside of the big cities?
So that's a great question. In rural Nevada, it is vast majority for Republicans. So the hope is on Election Day and then mail-in ballots that Democrats get enough turnout from Washoe County and Clark County, the two urban counties, to offset the rural votes that we see here in Nevada. And as far as numbers are looking today, I mean, Republicans have had a very strong turnout, so that could be an indicator. But again, you might see a winner or someone in the lead tonight, but that could very easily change once they start getting to all these mail-in ballots because, as we know, Democrats tend to favor sending in their mail-in ballots or dropping in their mail ballots, so that could very easily change if the margins are thin enough in the coming days.
Got it. Brett Forrest reporting live for us tonight from Las Vegas, where it's going to be a long night for you guys. Thanks so much for your help tonight. The divide between political parties coming up, how moderate voters are responding to candidate pushes this midterm election.
Also tonight, right here at the Live Desk, we are tracking some extreme winter weather along the West Coast tonight. The steps California is now taking to make sure people can get out there and vote. Next here at the Live Desk.
And we give you a live look here at Iowa tonight, where the Associated Press shows GOP Senator Chuck Grassley leading his Democratic challenger Michael Franken. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. We head now to Ohio, where a Republican governor was just reelected, but there is still a tight battle for a U.S. Senate seat tonight on this election night across America. The National Desk, Tom Bosco, joining us live in Columbus. Tell us, what can you share? What's happening there on the ground, Tom?
Well, good evening. You know, a huge win tonight for the governor, Mike DeWine, giving him a second term in office, likely his last job that he will have. He likely won't run again for another office, and of course that caps off an incredible career for this amazing politician. DeWine, of course, had come under fire from many in his own party for his response to the pandemic, but those pandemic measures that he took may have given him some support among moderate Democrats and swung this vote his way. Of course, a big winner. In fact, the Republicans in this state, looking at all of the major statewide races, they are sweeping those, including auditor, secretary of state, attorney general, and treasurer. Now, of course, as you mentioned, the big race that is still up in the air, but we're starting to get a clearer picture on that, is the race for U.S. Senate between Republican J.D. Vance and Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan. At this point, Vance holding between a 6 and 8 point lead as those votes get fewer and fewer that need to be counted. Still, Vance, of course, had help from former President Donald Trump to push him over the top in the primary election. And, of course, they were hoping that script was going to be the same for the general election. Trump appearing in Ohio last night for Vance, and we'll see if that could be the difference maker as we continue to wait for that race to be called here in Ohio. That's the scene here in Columbus, Ohio. I'm Tom Bosco, the National Desk.
Before we let you go, Tom, perhaps the difference is DeWine. So let's talk about that Senate race. It's seen as one of the key races for control of U.S. Senate. Can the governor's win give the momentum to then deliver a win for J.D. Vance as well?
Well, it is possible, but the governor's win was just massive, about a 30, 40-point win here in the state. The Senate race is going to be much, much more close there, and I think that really was the one race that the Democrats could be competitive in this state right now, especially with the climate, given Roe v. Wade, and then, of course, on the Republican side, the economic argument to be made with inflation and prices at the pumps.
Sure. J.D. Vance, by the way, of course, a Trump-supported candidate. What do you think the results in Ohio tonight mean for the 2024 race for the White House?
Well, that's really going to be interesting, no question about that. I think a bigger question, perhaps in Ohio, is going to be the next race for U.S. Senate in Ohio. Sherrod Brown is the other senator in Ohio. He is a Democrat and won as a Democrat in the same year that President Donald Trump won. So we've got some speculation that the current Secretary of State may run for U.S. Senate. And I think that's going to be, at least in Ohio, almost the more interesting race at this point than the 2024 election for president.
Tom Bosco, our man on the ground in Ohio tonight. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Well, outside of the politics tonight, severe weather, we are tracking that threatening coast tonight. The East Coast bracing for a late season hurricane, and the West Coast now under a winter weather threat tonight. Winter storm watches and warnings cover about a dozen states so far tonight. As much as 4 feet of snow now possible in parts of Nevada. New video coming into the live desk tonight from some of the hardest hit areas. Take a look at that, how quickly the snow is coming down over in Fairfield, Montana. This system also bringing bitter cold temperatures. The current temp there, just 2 degrees. And this video right here captured on the California side of Lake Tahoe today. First responders using heavy-duty equipment to move snow off of the road at the sheriff's office. Crews in California have been operating in storm operation mode all day for several hours now, an effort to keep roads clear enough for people to get to their voting precincts today. But the National Weather Service says this storm is much stronger than what the region usually sees in early November. The push for pot on the ballot across 5 states tonight: Maryland, Missouri, Arkansas, and both North and South Dakota, all deciding whether or not to legalize recreational use of marijuana. And so far tonight, we've been seeing voters, for the most part, showing high approval for these measures in several states. Now, Missouri voters, though, appear to be more split on this issue, with just under half of the votes counted so far tonight in that state. 52% of Missouri voters approving this legislation versus 47% voting against. Again, about 42% of the votes counted there so far tonight. Recreational marijuana now legal in 19 states plus Washington, D.C., but it remains illegal on the federal level. We are watching the results on this and several other ballot measures tonight, and we'll monitor the latest right here from the live desk.
Our election night coverage continues in just a moment. First, here's a look at America's news and weather now, where you live.
Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Charlie Lopresti with a look at the Northeast. We have clear skies and cool conditions out there tonight. The same areas that had temperatures in the 60s 2 nights ago for overnight lows will be in the 20s and 30s for lows tonight. But a nice rebound on Wednesday, a lot of sunshine. We have lighter winds. Temperatures will be in the upper 40s and low 50s. A few spots in New Jersey and parts in New York will be in the upper 50s. Now, if that's too cool for you, wait until Thursday. Notice 60s returning with a lot of sun.
I'm meteorologist Jonathan Myers, and here's a look at the Mid-Atlantic region. It's going to be mainly clear and chilly overnight into early on Wednesday. Temperatures settling well down into the 30s to right around 40. Some of the outlying areas you're going to need to do some scraping in the morning as well. Otherwise, again, that clear and crisp pattern continues for the midweek before late in the week and early into the weekend, potentially watching some of the remnant impacts from Nicole as it moves toward Florida and eventually up the East Coast. That's seen here.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Marshall McPeak. We have a little bit of a low pressure center up in the upper Great Lakes dragging a cold front through the area, so that's likely to give you a few showers in Minneapolis, the low down to around 47. But high pressure from South Bend down into Lexington, so clear skies and temperatures in the 40s. The rain becomes a little more widespread, and where cold air is settling in, you'll end up with some snow showers up near Bismarck. Des Moines, 72 degrees, but Bismarck only 31.
Good evening, everyone. Meteorologist Kristen Clark tracking the weather makers across the west. Still a potent storm is moving into the central Rockies. And while the snow's winding down for the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California, it begins to shift into the Intermountain West and the Rockies. Gusty winds, too, as cold high pressure does begin to settle into the Pacific Northwest. So travel impacts likely, especially for the higher terrain. And let's look at the weather from here.
Hi, meteorologist Chris Suchet. Look at our forecast across the region here on this election day. We've had a warm and a humid day with scattered clouds mixed with the sunshine, a couple of showers in southeastern Texas. We head to Wednesday's forecast. It starts mild, 60s and even some low 70s. The afternoon, mostly to partly sunny, another warm day. Changes, though, arriving Thursday. Cold front ready to move across Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle, with a drop in temperatures. That'll swing south through Friday with a chance for some rain.
I'm meteorologist Vitas Reed. Here's a look at your southeast overnight temperatures. A little bit cool in the upper 40s, Nashville, 54 Raleigh, jacket weather, definitely. 53 in Birmingham, still in those 70s down in southern portions of Florida. As we continue to head into Wednesday, it looks like we're going to see those temperatures in those mid-upper 60s, and it looks like we'll see those 70s to the south of us going to continue to track Nicole, as it is forecast to potentially become a Category 1 hurricane making landfall along the Florida coastline.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Breaking news as we come on the air tonight, election results pouring in. Good evening, I'm Eugene Ramirez. Races too close to call, and it could be days before we know results in some races. As it gets later, more polls closing now on the West Coast. We're keeping an eye on those. The National Desk brings you election night team coverage. At the live desk, Ryan Smith is tracking critical battles for governors across the country. Dee Dee Gatton checks in with voters. The fact-check team digs into exit polls and some other key data. And chief political correspondent Scott Thuman at the big board tonight dissecting the numbers coming in. The balance of power is shifting with midterm election results flowing in. We go live now to Scott Thuman at our Capitol Hill bureau. Scott, we have seen some shift already in Congress, even though many races won't be called perhaps for days. Walk us through some of these changes that we're seeing already.
Yeah, Eugene, ever changing here on Capitol Hill, minute by minute. Let's remind you where we were, where we are. Here's where we started the night in the U.S. House. Democrats 220, Republicans 212. Republicans just needing a net gain of 5 to take that chamber. How are they doing on that front? Well, 113 to 71. Republicans still a lot to fill in here on that chart as we continue to watch throughout the night. And what about over on the Senate side? 42-41. So we started, remember, 50-50. Democrats have that very slight margin of a lead, 17 seats to be decided. One of them may have been decided by the networks, but not everyone. So Ohio is a captivating race that we keep talking about all night long. A couple of the networks now are declaring J.D. Vance, the Republican, to be the winner in that race. We're waiting for the Associated Press. That's the standard we're going by tonight. But if that holds true, that means Republicans keep the power in that state. It was Senator Rob Portman retiring that opened that up. That means that Tim Ryan, the Democrat, the challenger, he would have lost. If that's the case, we'll alert you as soon as it happens. I want to talk to you, though, as we alluded to earlier tonight, Eugene, about some of the legal challenges that are going on around the country because they've been taking place. We've seen some from Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, just to name a few. Now, some of those have been resolved already, and they're moving on just fine counting votes. Others are still outstanding. So we have to see how those play out. Do they delay the inevitable, or do they get resolved pretty quickly? Here's a couple other things to consider. We love to say election day or election night, meaning it's going to be encapsulated in a 24-hour period. We're wiser than that. We've seen this movie, how it ends, too many times, and we know that it's going to take a while, right, Eugene? Take a look at what happened just a couple of years ago with President Biden's election. It was Pennsylvania, his home state, that was one of the hang-ups there. Election day was Tuesday. It wasn't resolved. He wasn't declared winner until Saturday at noon. So basically 4 days there. And let's go even farther back in the time machine to the year 2000 when Florida, which has a way of holding up elections, tonight doing pretty well getting results in. But in 2000, there was a delay for all those kids who weren't alive back then of 37 days fighting over what was going to happen there. The Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, all battling over
I was
what
in
would be
Florida
allowed.
for that one, Scott. I remember that one very clearly. I was there, and wow, what a mess, right? It was more than a month, people waiting and waiting for results. And we might find ourselves in that situation with some of these races being, in some cases, at some point tonight, less than a point difference between some of these candidates. I'm talking about the big race in Georgia. That one was so close.
Absolutely. And Eugene, then you were there. We were both there. Remember that number, 537. That's how many votes decided Florida and eventually allowed for George Bush to become President George W. Bush. That was out of more than 6 million ballots cast. So we see how that can go. It doesn't mean that's necessarily going to be what happens tonight, but when you talk about how much effort, how much money, how much stumping, the speeches, the fighting, the debates have been put into the midterm elections, especially in that fight over the Senate, we may be here a while. We don't know.
Can we take another look, while you got the map there, at Georgia tonight? I mean, there's been so much interest in this race, and it's been so close. I thought, yeah, I mean, look at that. You're talking about... It's like
sure, 71% reporting so far, Eugene. 49.3 Herschel Walker, 48.7 Raphael Warnock. Now, the latest poll average going into tonight, so as of about 10 hours ago, showed that Herschel Walker, on average, was going to be up 1 percentage point. Now, keep in mind, that may or may not be enough to end the race. There's a third candidate, a libertarian. If he were to get enough votes and peel away some from Raphael Warnock, peel away some from Herschel Walker, and neither candidate gets 50% of the vote after everything is tabulated, that's when you have the runoff. That's already slated if it needs to take place on December 6th. But it just goes to show you all the money, and you still can't figure out exactly who's going to win until all those votes are counted. That's what makes election nights so interesting, because we shouldn't be able to predict. It shouldn't just come down to surveys and polls. It has to come down to the ballot box.
Pretty wild. That's with 71% of the precincts reporting, and of course every precinct and every vote, as you've showed us, counts. Scott Thigman reporting for us tonight. We'll check back in just a bit. Governors also carrying extra weight these days, especially these elections, with the Supreme Court sending power back to the states, like of course the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. Let's check in now at the live desk with Ryan Smith. He continues our team coverage now, also eyeing Arizona tonight.
And breaking tonight, we're getting our first results in Arizona's highly contested gubernatorial race, with 47% of the vote in. As you see on your screens here, Democrat Secretary of State Katie Hobbs leading Trump-endorsed Republican Kari Lake 57 to 43%. And it could be days until we know the winner of this race, Arizona's most populous county tonight, saying it will take them until at least Friday to count the majority of ballots that were cast today. Now, these results coming in less than an hour after a state judge denied an emergency request to extend voting hours there. It was filed by a number of Republican organizations, saying voters needed more time to cast their ballots after issues with voting machines. Moving east now, Kansas has been described as a true toss-up state and one of the most vulnerable Democratic seats. Governor Laura Kelly there holding about a 4 to 5 point advantage right now at this hour over Republican rival Derek Schmidt, that state's attorney general. We have seen that lead shrink as the night goes on, and so far, just checked moments ago on this, 80% of votes counted so far tonight. And in Georgia, incumbent Governor Brian Kemp now holding on to a healthy lead over Stacey Abrams. He's leading 54 to 45 right now with 74% of the vote in. Abrams had originally taken an early lead tonight, but we've watched it dry up over the past 3 hours. Now, across the country, we are keeping tabs. 36 governor's races happening tonight. Democrats already flipping 2 seats, one in Maryland and one in Massachusetts. We'll be right here tracking them for you throughout the night here at the live desk.
With all that said, Ryan, the night's still young. Deeply discouraged is how voters describe the state of America and its future as well. That's according to an extensive survey conducted for the Associated Press. Half of those voters surveyed said inflation factored significantly in their vote, with price increases hitting groceries, gasoline, housing, and food over the past year. The U.S. economy was an overarching concern for voters, about 8 in 10 of them saying it was in bad shape as high inflation has fueled fears of a recession. Not all voters, however, blaming President Biden's policies for those higher prices. Earlier in Pennsylvania, we told you about reports of many machines running out of paper at several voting sites there, leading to extended hours in one county. Well, tonight we're learning it's not the only spot that's facing issues like that. Our Didi Gadden joining us now with a look at what people faced at the polls today. Kind of like an uneasy experience for some of these voters. Not exactly what they expected, right?
Right. It comes with the territory. Eugene, we're learning 4 voting precincts in North Carolina had to stay open for an additional amount of time today, from issues printing out voter authorization forms to being locked out to running out of ballots. They all impacted voters today. The ones we heard from adamant about getting to the polls.
I'm concerned about the direction that our country's going, so I tried to do some research and see what each candidate stands for and make sure that we all have a voice.
With the state of the economy and with the nation being so divisive, I felt, I can't complain unless I do my part. So that's why it was important for me to vote.
And according to reports, inflation and abortion among top issues for voters, according to preliminary exit polling. We'll hear some more from voters on the biggest races nationwide in just a few minutes. Eugene.
Right, straight from the voters. Didi Gadden for us. Thank you. We're following some developments in an issue that's been bubbling up in Arizona today. Election officials there trying to calm concerns after machines rejected ballots in the first few hours of voting. Some now questioning election integrity there. Ryan Smith mentioned this just a few moments ago. Several groups now, including the Republican National Committee, have now filed a lawsuit over this. Well, county officials say it's just a technical issue, no fraud. They claim that the tabulating machines at about 40 locations rejected these ballots because a built-in security feature was accidentally activated. Some Republicans, though, and that includes high-profile gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake, are raising doubts about this.
They gotta fix this problem. This is incompetency. I hope it's not malice, but we're gonna fix it. We're gonna win. And when we win, there's gonna be come to Jesus for elections in Arizona.
Well, Donald Trump Jr. also chiming in on this one. He's among those who are tweeting about concerns there in Arizona. In some cases, some suggesting that the election might be, quote, stolen. Another lawsuit filed in Pennsylvania, this one by Democrats. They want ballots that have been deemed invalid because of incorrectly written or missing dates to be counted in the election. Pennsylvania Supreme Court already ruled in favor of the Republican National Committee last week to have those ballots tossed out, citing state law that requires the date on the return envelope. Well, Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman's campaign is one of the parties involved in that Pennsylvania suit. His campaign issuing a statement arguing that the, quote, date instruction imposes unnecessary hurdles. And Florida today pushing back against the federal government. State election officials objecting to the Justice Department's plan to monitor polling places, arguing that that violates Florida election law. Officials sent a letter to the DOJ warning that their election monitors would not be allowed inside. And if they found themselves inside, it would be, quote, counterproductive and could potentially undermine confidence in the election. Well, the Justice Department did send poll watchers to 23 other states. You see them here. They were tasked with ensuring federal voting rights laws were being followed. You're watching the National Desk Election Night Team coverage. Coming up in just moments. The election's results coming in right now. We're going live to New York and Florida for a look at what's happening on the ground there as voters pick their governor. And I'll check back with the fact check team breaking down the exit polls tonight. It's election night, and we're just getting started.
Tonight, a late-season tropical system now churning toward the state of Florida. The new damage estimates just coming into the live desk. Details ahead.
Yeah, live over Atlanta, Georgia tonight, where Herschel Walker is expected to speak tonight, the Republican Senate candidate in this very tight race against Democrat Raphael Warnock. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. In New York tonight, Governor Kathy Hochul currently holding on to a lead. The Democrat in a fierce fight right now with the Republican challenger Lee Zeldin. We take you live now to Albany, New York. The National Desk, Ann McCloy standing by there. So far, Ann, looking like a pretty good night for Kathy Hochul. What can you tell us?
It does look like a good night for Kathy Hochul so far. Right now, Hochul has a 14-point lead over her Republican challenger, Lee Zeldin. This with 63% of New York precincts reporting. We've heard one outlet has actually already called the race for Kathy Hochul tonight, but it's still very early on and things could change, but this is a pretty hefty lead for Hochul, and it looks like she's much further ahead than people thought that she would be tonight. We thought that this would be a nail biter. We had polls just a couple of days ago putting Zeldin ahead of Hochul, and this is a very blue state. This would have been a huge upset for Kathy Hochul. Tonight, the Democrats are breathing a sigh of relief, at least at this moment.
A blue state that for a couple of days there, people were wondering if it wasn't going to be blue very much longer. But Hochul now completing former Governor Andrew Cuomo's race. So this would actually be a historic night here. If she wins, she would be New York's first elected female governor. So a big night for her, a big night for women in the state of New York. It looks like she's pulling away with it now. What do you think was that key issue that's taking her to this lead? I know at the end of her campaign, she had a little bit of an about face in the messaging, focusing more on crime at one point.
Well, I think no matter what tonight, Hochul learned that public safety is an issue that New Yorkers care about, because we saw the race totally change at the very last minute. But she campaigned on abortion. She campaigned against Lee Zeldin on January 6th, and she connected him to former President Donald Trump. And with a huge enrollment for Democrats here in New York State, Zeldin still had a big hill to climb up to get anywhere near Hochul in this race. Again, it's a little bit early here, but 14 points ahead at this point. It looks like Hochul is really getting away from Zeldin at this point tonight.
A big lead so late now in the night for the East Coast. Thank you so much. We appreciate your help tonight. Ann McCloy reporting from Albany, New York.
Here at the Live Desk tonight, we are tracking the growing threat from Tropical Storm Nicole. Experts now predicting that storm could cause upwards of $3 billion in damage in Florida alone. Tonight, Nicole is churning less than 400 miles from Florida's east coast. Now, it's forecast to make landfall as a hurricane as early as Thursday morning. And right now, tropical weather alerts cover most of all of Florida, including hurricane and storm surge warnings. In response to this, the first evacuation recommendations were issued today. Officials in Brevard County, Florida, now urging people in some of the most vulnerable locations along the coastline to go ahead and move inland. Experts also estimating that upwards of 20 million people will feel the impacts of those strong winds and other elements from this system, and another 800,000 people could see dangerous storm surge. Governor Ron DeSantis issuing a state of emergency for 34 counties ahead of Nicole's late season landfall. Now, the U.S. hasn't been hit by a hurricane this late in the year since dating back to 1985.
Well, in Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson is his chamber's most at-risk incumbent Republican right now. He's facing the state's lieutenant governor, Democrat Mandela Barnes, who the party promotes now as one of the rising stars for Democrats. The National Desk Ben Krumholtz joins us now from Madison, Wisconsin, with the latest polling out of there tonight. What's happening there on the ground?
Well, right now, Ron Johnson, the incumbent, does have a slight lead over the challenger, Mandela Barnes. The polls leading up to this were very close. Johnson, who had the endorsement from former President Donald Trump, chose not to invite him to Wisconsin to campaign for him, instead doing the campaigning on his own, focusing largely on public safety and election integrity. Of course, Barnes focusing largely on abortion. Right now, the race is very close. As for the governor's race, which we're also following, the incumbent Tony Evers has a 2 percentage point lead right now over Tim Michels, with about 40% of the vote still to come in. So the incumbents in Wisconsin are faring much better tonight than the challengers.
Now, it does appear that Ron Johnson, is going to maybe pull away with this tonight. What do you think was key to flip this race? Is there any one particular issue that voters there were really motivated by?
It's tough to say. When you looked at all the polling, it was mostly the economy. The economy polled very high in Wisconsin. Abortion wasn't that high. It was about 5th or 6th on the chain of issues as far as importance to voters. Election integrity also was a big one, and public safety, which were the big three for Senator Ron Johnson.
And when we talk about Mandela Barnes being a rising star for the Democratic Party, a loss tonight would really be a big blow, not only to his career, but to Democrats as they look for young leaders to take the party forward. Have you talked to any voters about that and what they think this might signal for, say, 2024 and the future as Democrats try to find some leaders to take up that power position within the party?
Yeah, not too much talk about 2024 yet. Obviously, they're favorable on Mandela Barnes. Ron Johnson spent a lot of time attacking his views and going into the past because Barnes brought up the fact that perhaps the police should be defunded. He really stepped back from that in the campaign, but he obviously is kind of a young up-and-comer for the Democrats. So it'll be interesting to see where they turn from here if he doesn't end up pulling ahead of Senator Johnson. And so far, he hasn't been doing that.
All right. Thank you for your help tonight. Ben Krumholtz reporting for us live.
High-stakes battles over abortion access on the ballot today. We will take you to those states now voting on this right here next at the Live Desk. Abortion access on the ballot in a handful of states tonight, in California, Michigan, and in Vermont. And at this hour tonight, voters seem overwhelmingly approving of these measures to codify abortion rights in those 3 states. Now, in Kentucky, it appears voters are following the same route as Kansas took a few months ago, shooting down what's known as Amendment 2. That amendment would state there is no right to abortion in the state constitution or any requirement to fund abortion. And so far tonight, Kentuckians voting no on this, 47% to 52% saying yes to Amendment 2. Montana voters are deciding if health care providers could face criminal charges in some circumstances for those services. The law would declare that an embryo or fetus is a legal person. We are continuing to track all the results right here at the Live Desk.
Ryan, thanks. We're going to check back in now with the Fact Check team. They've been looking at the national and state exit polls for us all night. We have Courtney and Connor standing by there. Ladies, what are you finding right now on how Democrats and Republicans differ when it comes to their top concerns?
Well, Eugene, according to Politico, nearly 75% of voters are either dissatisfied or downright angry with the way things are going in our nation. And about the same amount say inflation has caused their families moderate to severe hardship.
And we found this to be really interesting. Over half of Republicans and Democrats can actually agree on something, but unfortunately, it's that our democracy is threatened. But here's the catch. Politico reports that they don't agree on what that threat actually is. But we found 2/3 of Republicans express skepticism over President Biden's 2020 victory. Meanwhile, Democrats and President Biden point to January 6th. But we'll keep tracking these exit polls, and we'll be back with more information for you in about 30 minutes.
Connor and Janae with the Fact Check team, thanks. The deck of history stacked against Democrats tonight. Still ahead, we're taking a closer look at the party's strategy these midterms and the role President Biden played.
And someone tonight sitting on a record-breaking Powerball jackpot. We take you to where the winning ticket was sold in California, and we hear from the gas station owner where that ticket was sold next here at the Live Desk. breaking tonight, Republican Governor of Texas Greg Abbott has won a third term over high-profile Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke. Now, this becomes O'Rourke's third political loss in 6 years. The two have sparred in recent weeks over gun rights and Abbott's response to the Uvalde school shooting. The incumbent tonight, though, winning here 55%, 43%. As you see on your screen, he secures his third term here in the Lone Star State. Now, someone struck Lotto Gold in the Golden State. The record-setting $2 billion jackpot, the largest in Lotto history, finally announced after a 10-hour delay overnight due to a technical issue. Here's a look at where that winning ticket was sold. This is Joe's Service Center in Los Angeles County. The winner has yet to come forward, but California law does require his or her name to eventually become public. The odds of matching all 6 numbers on that loan ticket, 1 in 292 million. It's thrilling news for the gas station owner who now nets a cool $1 million for selling the winning ticket.
I come to this country, the continent, for a dream for the people looking for a better life.
Where'd you come from?
I come 1980 with $14,000 and 2 kids and with a wife. As a family business, all my kids, they help me. Very soon, maybe I will be retired.
Now, the $2 billion prize has a cash value of $997 million.
Going to give you a live look now into Ohio tonight. This is the event for the J.D. Vance campaign. J.D. Vance, the Trump-supported Republican candidate there, right now in the lead. We're waiting for official confirmation from the Associated Press before we call this, or before they call this, or we report that they've called it. But this is one of the races that is seen as pivotal for control of the U.S. Senate. The Republican in that race, J.D. Vance, the Democrat in that race, Tim Ryan. Right now, they're looking at about a 6 or 7 point difference right now. J.D. Vance there in the lead. We're waiting for him to speak at any moment now, and we will check back with that live shot there in Ohio as soon as we hear more. Let's go back down to Ryan at the live desk for more of what's coming in there.
Hey, yeah, obviously this has been a race that has captured not only what's happening in the state of Ohio, but nationwide. J.D. Vance has welcomed former President Donald Trump in recent weeks for several campaign stops, so it remains to be seen. We will see what that Trump effect and that endorsement really carries in the state of Ohio. It's a state that Trump won back in 2020, so we will see again what that endorsement does as we wait for these results here tonight.
Yeah, lots of information coming into the live desk all night long. I know that this is one of the big races that Ryan's been watching for us all night. Scott Thuman's been talking about this. We're going to see now if there's finally going to be a call here, and we'll let you know as soon as we learn that. But still ahead tonight, battle for control. Scott Thuman looking at results in 3 Midwest states, any of which could swing the balance of power in the Senate. Ohio's one of them. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Live from the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. Good evening, I'm Eugene Ramirez. More voting results coming in tonight. Scott Thuman joining us again now live from our Capitol Hill Bureau. Scott, no big upsets yet, but has the balance of power shifted even more tonight?
It has, and you're right, you have to emphasize with some real strong gusto that word yet, because we don't know, and it is still early in many respects. This is where we stand right now in the House. So you're starting to see some of that red addition on this map, 147 to 95 on that chart. And let's look at what's going on in the Senate right now, 44-43. Remember, not long ago it was 42-41. You're seeing some movement there. People kept talking about the red wave. Are we going to see this massive momentum kind of spill out across the map for Republicans? Well, it hasn't necessarily happened yet. Part of that is because there's huge voter involvement this time around. Remember, we had 44 million early votes alone. This is supposed to be a record-breaking turnout for midterms. It takes a lot of time to count all those votes. Precincts pretty busy. Sometimes you had delays, staying open a little bit later. That's part of the reason we don't have a lot of answers yet, although some are being made a little bit more clear. Look at what's happening. Now we've got declarations in Colorado. We've got them in Idaho. Now Ohio. We talked about it a lot, right? J.D. Vance being declared the winner there over Tim Ryan. That is a hold for Republicans. It was an open seat, but J.D. Vance, with the power of President Trump behind him, takes that win there. And then actually New Hampshire, not being declared yet by the Associated Press, but President Biden has called Maggie Hassan, the senator already in that seat, and congratulated her on re-election. We're still waiting for the Associated Press. One other thing, Eugene, to talk about as we wait to see if this red wave really does exist. Keep in mind, in 2018, it was about 11 p.m., 11:30 before we started to see a lot of those results come in that indicated who was going to win and take control of Congress. But also, let's talk for one quick minute about what's happened in past midterms. And I know, Eugene, you and I have referenced the fact that the party in power, the president's party, often suffers during that president's first term in the midterm election. It's a big turnaround, right? Here's some numbers for you. Keep in mind, under President Trump, his term, he had his only one term as we know, but during that midterms, he lost 40 House seats. Republicans lost 40 seats in the House. He gained 2 in the Senate. Kind of unusual for that split. President Obama's first term lost 63 House seats. 63, massive number, and 6 Senate seats. President Bush, George W. Bush, a bit of an anomaly, gained 8 seats in the House, gained 2 in the Senate. But that was after 9/11. He had huge approval ratings at the time. Sure. A lot of coalescing, a lot of unity there. But under President Clinton before him, first term, lost 54 House seats, 8 Senate seats. Really big numbers. We don't know if that's what's going to happen tonight on the House side, on the Senate side, because we still have to wait. We've got to look what's going to happen with those big key ones.
A lot of these midterm races seen as a referendum on the current administration. And we know that what's moving voters, according to multiple polls, has been the economy. And then we've seen the disapproval numbers for the president's job. And it just kind of all starts making sense, right? We talked a lot, you and I, Scott, over the past couple of days leading up to tonight about polling and whether you can believe it and, whether we've seen surprises or just polls that are flat out wrong. Have you been surprised by anything tonight? Because I feel like we're seeing exactly what we've been talking about.
Not yet, and there is something to take away from this, that there is a testament in whether or not you really can trust the polls. Remember how wrong the polls got it in many people's eyes, especially in 2016 when President Trump beat Hillary Clinton. Now, technically, remember, she won the popular vote. So the polls weren't wrong nationally. Where they were wrong were on the state and local levels, where they said this is what's going to happen in this particular swing state, and they were way off, and that's why people were so shocked when they saw the final figures come in 2016. Now, the national polling has improved. They're better at taking into account a voter's education level and how prone they are to going to the ballot box on Election Day. And they've got a better understanding of what happens in early voters, who are more likely to be early voters, who's more likely to do it in person. So they've got a better grasp on it. State and local level, they don't get that kind of funding for some of these polls that are done at a more granular space. And so that's where some of that mishap may occur in predicting and then being wrong. But so far, it seems across the board, they've been relatively on point.
Still plenty of time, though. You never know when a surprise is to sneak up on you. So hold on and watch what happens here. Scott Thuman, thanks. We'll check back with you in a bit.
And breaking tonight here at the Live Desk, Beto O'Rourke speaking right here live in Texas shortly after the Associated Press called the race in favor of his Republican opponent, Texas Governor, the incumbent, Greg Abbott. Now, this marks O'Rourke's third loss in 6 years' time. He ran on a progressive platform. Abbott will now serve a third term in the state of Texas. Another governor's race just called tonight as well. Incumbent Governor Tim Walz has won re-election in the state of Minnesota. His first term included widespread civil unrest in the state following the murder of George Floyd. He defeats Trump-endorsed candidate Scott Jensen, who ran on a law and order message. Voters also electing governors across 36 states nationwide tonight, impacting several hot-button issues like abortion and gun rights, and new results just coming into the Live Desk from Pennsylvania as well. Take a look at these latest numbers here. Democrat Attorney General Josh Shapiro off in the lead here. He continues his lead tonight over Trump-endorsed Republican Doug Mastriano. With 72% of the vote in tonight, Shapiro is leading 54% to 43%. We're also keeping a close eye in the state of New York. Recent polling showed Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin closing in recent days on Governor Kathy Hochul. But you see here tonight, she holds a lead 55% to 44% against Lee Zeldin. And in one of the tightest gubernatorial races in the country tonight, that's happening in Nevada. Governor Steve Sisolak facing off against Republican and Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Still no results just yet to report tonight out of Nevada, and it is important to note President Biden narrowly winning Nevada back in 2020.
And as we wait for election results tonight to find out what's next, we are already getting a breakdown of how politicians did on the campaign trail, the messages and the strategies that worked and resonated with voters, and of course those that did not. The National Desk's Christine Frizzell has that story.
Hello, Maryland.
President Biden on a blue state blitz.
Hello, New York.
Spending the final weeks leading up to Election Day campaigning largely with Democrats expected to win by large margins.
President Biden is going where President Biden could be helpful to turn out Democratic votes in places that tend to like President Biden.
Those rare stops in swing states, mostly with his former boss, President Obama. And that's for a good reason, says Professor Peter Loge.
Elect John Fetterman to the Senate, please.
President Biden's approval rating coming in at 39%, according to this week's Reuters Ipsos poll. Political analysts say top issues Democrats have been running on, like abortion rights and threats to democracy, are a little more abstract than Republicans' top priorities, the economy and crime, which most people feel every day. And there's simply history to contend with.
The president's party loses seats in the House in midterm elections. That's almost as close to a truism as you're going to get in American politics.
Both President Obama in 2010 and President Trump in 2018 made far more midterm campaign stops. And while some crucial seats flipped from Democrat to Republicans in the Senate, like in Missouri and Indiana in 2018, and Republicans held control of the Senate, Democrats made enormous gains and took control of the House that year. Most polls showing a similar flip this time around.
It's about deploying the right messenger with the right message to the right audience in the right medium at the right time. And Trump is good at getting angry people angry to marching them to the polls. President Biden, that's not really his forte.
I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk.
Take you out live now to Ohio, where the Republican J.D. Vance, declared by the Associated Press as the winner of the much-watched U.S. Senate race in Ohio, is now speaking. Let's listen in.
My uncle, aren't you glad that he won? That would have been a terrible ride home, right? That's what we're thinking here in the Vance family. We're staying on top of the important stuff. I could not have done this. Could not have won this race. Could not have had what we have here tonight. I mean, look. The governor and the lieutenant governor crushed it. Every other statewide office crushed it. I'm so grateful to Mike DeWine and John Houston. I'm so grateful to Bob Paduchik for helping us cobble together a unified Republican team. And we won big, ladies and gentlemen. What an incredible thing. Oh, my Lord. And I got to say, of course, I had so much fun going around campaigning with all the statewide officials. I had so much incredible experiences getting to meet people all across the state of Ohio. But thank you to the Ohio Republican Party. We just got a chance to govern. We just got a great chance to govern, and we need to use it. And I promise to all of my friends who are going to be at the State House, to all of my friends who are going to be at the state capitol, we need better leadership in Washington, D.C., and that's exactly what I promise to fight for every single day. Now, the last thing I want to say, the last couple of words of gratitude here. I have been blessed with an incredible campaign team. And I can't thank these guys enough, but I want to name a few people by name. First of all, the guy who probably spent the most time on the campaign trail the last year and a half, and when we won the primary, I forgot him, Patrick McAllister. Thank you for getting us safe to where we need to go. To Jordan, our great campaign manager, Brian, who's the first hire in our campaign. Our incredible comms team, Taylor and Luke. And you guys may have noticed that the national media was very interested in our race. So Taylor and Luke had their hands full.
You have been listening and watching now U.S. Senator-elect J.D. Vance, the Trump-backed Republican, giving a bit of a victory speech there tonight. A big win for him. That race called by the Associated Press. Meantime, in Oregon, polls closed there in just the last hour. Incumbent Democrat Senator Ron Wyden faces Republican challenger Jo Ray Perkins as Democratic control of Congress is on the line right now. The National Desk Genevieve Rayam joins us now from Portland with details of that race. What are things looking like there?
What I can tell you is that is certainly a significant race. We are here at the Hyatt Regency in Northeast Portland, where Ron Wyden is expected to be, as well as Tina Kotek. The big race here in Oregon right now at this point has to be with the governor. That is because there are three women who are eyeing that spot. We have a Republican, Christine Drazan, we have Democrat Tina Kotek, and we have unaffiliated Betsy Johnson. So three women, and it is a neck-and-neck race between the Democrat and the Republican. This is important because Oregon has not had a Republican governor for 40 years. And the latest polls just came out, and it looks like Tina Kotek, the Democrat, has 45.49% of the votes at this point, and Republican Christine Drazan has 44.54. So this is within 1 percentage point. Again, the polls just closed about 30 minutes ago, 45 minutes ago or so, at 8 o'clock here Pacific time. So the results are just starting to come in, but it is going to be a very close race here. Of course, as you mentioned, control of Congress is a huge issue in Oregon. It's on top of mind for voters here as they see who wins those key races. Of course, Ron Wyden's race is one of them. Last I checked, Ron Wyden was in the lead, but I can tell you, I've been here at Tina Kotek's campaign for hours now. I just got done talking with the vice chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon, and she told me she's nervous. There's anxiety right now. There's concern that Tina Kotek will not win this race and that we will have a Republican governor for the first time in 40 years. But again, it is very early. It's very early right now. The results are just starting to come in. We, of course, do have mail-in voting here in Oregon, so we will continue to get results over the next several days. Nothing is determined right now. For now, reporting live in Portland, Genevieve Rayam, back to you.
Genevieve, thanks so much. We continue to follow key races in Georgia as well, including the battle in a rematch for governor. Didi Gatton joining us now with what was on voters' minds as they headed to the polls today. Didi.
Eugene, Georgia Republican Governor Brian Kemp and Democratic challenger Stacey Abrams facing off in a rematch of the state's last governor's race. Many from different backgrounds came out and they had a say on who gets elected.
It is critical to me because I'm an educator. And like I said, I've served 18 years as an educator. Now I'm at the district level. So what she is trying to do right now for educators will really help us. And we all know that educators are underpaid.
I think the employment right now in Georgia, it concerns me. Because I see a lot of people not working. I see just from personal experience, going into restaurants, going into grocery stores, going wherever I'm going, I see a lack of employment. And so I think that's a big issue that we need to solve.
And of course, we will also continue to closely watch Georgia's Senate race. Eugene, there is a third-party candidate. If no candidate wins at least 50% of the vote, the race could go to a runoff in December.
And breaking tonight, speaking of the state of Georgia, the high-profile governor's race in Georgia has officially been called. Stacey Abrams calling to concede to incumbent Brian Kemp. We'll have the latest details coming up on the other side of this break. And breaking tonight, we're going to take you live to Georgia tonight, where we have just learned incumbent Republican Governor Brian Kemp speaking on the main stage. Let's go to his address.
The people in this room and hardworking Georgians all across our state know these last 4 years have not been easy. Because of a global pandemic, loved ones were lost, jobs were cut, businesses struggled, and lives were uprooted. Nearly overnight, Americans from all walks of life were made to feel anxious, maybe even frightened for their future, their family's future, and the future of our country. This was an unprecedented challenge we had never faced before. There was no playbook. There was no widely accepted path forward. No silver bullet that could bring back our normal way of life. On top of that, you add in the 2020 election, pandemic politics, and a lot of people that didn't live here or vote here thinking they knew what was best for our state. At one point or another, the national media, Stacey Abrams, the healthcare pundits, far-left activists, liberal donors, presidents, both current and former, they all were attacking Georgia. They opposed our measured approach to protecting both lives and livelihoods. According to the pundits and the so-called experts, if you wanted to keep your barbershop open, you were a threat
Listening live to Georgia Governor Brian Kemp giving what we expect is a victory speech. We do want to mention the Associated Press has not officially called this race, but reports are circulating that his challenger, Stacey Abrams, called him tonight to concede in this race. Stick with us. We'll be back in about 90 seconds. The push for pot on the ballot in 5 states tonight: Maryland, Missouri, Arkansas, and North and South Dakota, all deciding whether or not to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. So far tonight, we've seen voters, for the most part, showing high approval for these measures. Now, one state in particular, though, Missouri voters appear to be more split on this issue. With about 70% of the votes cast so far, 53% of Missouri voters are approval of this legislation versus 46% who appear to be against. Recreational marijuana now legal in 19 states, including Washington, D.C., but remains illegal on the federal level. We will continue to watch these results come in tonight right here from the live desk.
As we head to break, we'll give you a live look here at Iowa, where the Associated Press just called the Senate race for incumbent Republican Chuck Grassley. You're watching the National Desk on this election night. We'll be right back. Our election coverage continues, but it might be some time before we know the results of many of the races we've been discussing tonight. The National Desk Scott Thuman joining us now from our Capitol Hill bureau. The election night per se is coming to an end, a few minutes away from midnight. What are your closing thoughts here as this continues for days, perhaps?
My closing thought, Eugene, is brew an extra pot of coffee. Get the no-dos.
Looks like we have an issue with your mic, Scott, if you want to check that real quick for us. And while you do that, I'll give you my thoughts so far. My thoughts so far, Scott, is that this is going to go on for quite some time. We've had some big races that have been called. We just saw Brian Kemp. I believe we're waiting for confirmation on that, but he's giving his victory speech. We saw J.D. Vance. We've seen a lot of significant races already. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida winning a re-election there. So we're seeing what we've been talking about for many days now. Americans voting with economy on their mind. And also, this red wave starts to be appearing before our eyes. We'll see how the rest of the races turn out tonight. Do we have Scott? Are we going back to Scott? We do not have Scott.
Eugene, you got me now?
We got you now. All right.
Hey,
we're running out of time here, but I'd love your final thoughts because you've been following this. I mean, we've been talking about this for weeks now.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Well, I was saying that you need to brew an extra pot of coffee and get the no-nos out because this election is going to continue, which actually is a testament to what we thought, that this was going to be close. There were going to be a lot of tight races. Look at the balance of power here in the House. Democrats 112, Republicans 161. Go over to the Senate. We are seeing some movement over here. 45-44. What's going on, you ask? Okay, well, we've got some declarations. You obviously have Democrats taking Oregon, as we talked about earlier. Republicans got Iowa. But what is still outstanding that's going to take all the attention now? Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Go out west, Nevada, Arizona, still undecided. They probably won't be decided for quite some time. A lot of people voting. A lot of precincts were packed, even though polls are closed almost everywhere now across the country. These states are the tipping points for that balance of power.
And those states, Scott, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we've got to wrap it up here. Those states specifically, Georgia, Pennsylvania, I mean, we've been talking about this. We knew this was going to play out like this, and here we're seeing it happen that way. Scott Thuman, thank you for your help tonight. That's going to wrap it for us tonight. The conversation picks up online and on air tomorrow morning, starting at 6 a.m. I'm sure you'll have some more results to look at then. Now we leave you with one last look at America's news and weather now where you live. Good night.
Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Charlie Lopresti with a look at the Northeast. We have clear skies and cool conditions out there tonight. The same areas that had temperatures in the 60s 2 nights ago for overnight lows will be in the 20s and 30s for lows tonight. But a nice rebound on Wednesday, a lot of sunshine. We have lighter winds. Temperatures will be in the upper 40s and low 50s. A few spots in New Jersey and parts of New York will be in the upper 50s. Now, if that's too cool for you, wait until Thursday. Notice 60s returning with a lot of sun.
I'm meteorologist Jonathan Myers, and here's a look at the Mid-Atlantic region. It's going to be mainly clear and chilly overnight into early on Wednesday. Temperatures settling well down into the 30s to right around 40. Some of the outlying areas are going to need to do some scraping in the morning as well. Otherwise, again, that clear and crisp pattern continues for the midweek before late in the week and early into the weekend, potentially watching some of the remnant impacts from Nicole as it moves toward Florida and eventually up the East Coast. That's the scene here.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Marshall McPeak. We have a little bit of a low pressure center up in the upper Great Lakes, dragging a cold front through the area. So that's likely to give you a few showers in Minneapolis, the low down to around 47. But high pressure from South Bend down into Lexington. So clear skies and temperatures in the 40s. The rain becomes a little more widespread, and where cold air is settling in, you'll end up with some snow showers up near Bismarck. Des Moines, 72 degrees, but Bismarck only 31.
Good evening, everyone. Meteorologist Kristen Clark tracking the weather makers across the west. Still a potent storm is moving into the central Rockies. And while the snow's winding down for the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California, it begins to shift into the Intermountain West and the Rockies. Gusty winds, too, as cold high pressure does begin to settle into the Pacific Northwest. So travel impacts likely, especially for the higher terrain. And let's look at the weather from here.
Hi, meteorologist Chris Suchet. Look at our forecast across the region here on this election day. We've had a warm and a humid day with scattered clouds mixed with the sunshine, a couple of showers in southeastern Texas. We head into Wednesday's forecast. It starts mild, 60s and even some low 70s. The afternoon, mostly to partly sunny, another warm day. Changes, though, arriving Thursday. Cold front ready to move across Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle, with a drop in temperatures. That'll swing south through Friday with a chance for some rain.
I'm meteorologist Vitas Reed. Here's a look at your southeast overnight temperatures. A little bit cool in the upper 40s, Nashville, 54 Raleigh, jacket weather, definitely. 53 in Birmingham, still in those 70s down in southern portions of Florida. As we continue to head into Wednesday, it looks like we're going to see those temperatures in those mid-upper 60s, and it looks like we'll see those 70s to the south of us, going to continue to track Nicole, as it is forecast to potentially become a Category 1 hurricane making landfall along the Florida coastline.